hip hop, hip hop,
Yeah,
hip hop, hip
bars is back.
hip hop,
Sam
hip
Ant,
hop,
oh
hip
God,
hop,
what's
hip
up with you?
hop.
I done watched them niggas do interview after interview. They not culture vultures, the culture something they been into. So if you never gave them a view, I recommend you do. Cause when they question guests, they message is not subliminal.
Do that.
It
So
don't matter if
I
you
try and not
already
make those
know.
decisions based on race or any of those sorts of things. I just try and make those decisions as smartly as I can based on the people that I'm going to have to work with. And hopefully those people treat me with respect and I treat them with respect, and hopefully we do great work. And I just kind of look at it like that.
Powerful. You know, when I want to talk about American Gods now and Mr. Nancy in particular, when I first, well, it was about last year, last December, when everything started going down and I heard what you said about the American Gods series, that I actually got introduced to it and started watching it and got acquainted with this guy named, this god, should I say, named Mr. Nancy. And the shit blew me away. The fact that they had this kind of character who kind of reminded me of Clarence William III off of Tales from the Hood. Like, he gave me them kind of chills, them kind of vibes. But the knowledge and stuff that they was kicking, I'm like, how is this dude even on TV? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And you wrote a lot of those roles. Can you just give us a little bit of perspective into how Mr. Nancy came to life?
So I grew up with Anansi, right? My grandma used to read me stories of the Tricky Spider. And that's kind of how I learned and knew about the character. So I really wanted this role. And I was in Africa at the time, in South Africa, and I was working on a show called Madiba with Lawrence Fishburne. I was playing Oliver Tambo. And for those of you who don't know, Oliver Tambo is the real architect of dismantling apartheid. His best friend, Nelson Mandela, was in jail. He was in London organizing the UN and, frankly, smuggling money into South Africa and getting the Russians to give him arms so he could, frankly, rise up and defeat this racist system. So I always wanted to play that role. And then suddenly Mr. Nancy popped up and I was on social media sending messages to Neil Gaiman like, yo, Mr. Nancy, holla at your boy. And he retweeted it. And I was like, wow. And then I got a phone call from the show creators, Brian Fuller and Michael Green. And they didn't know nothing about that stuff on Twitter. They just knew of my work as an actor and invited me into the process. And they wrote the slave ship speech and really just kind of handed it to me and said, they weren't even on set when I shot it. They were like, all you, do your thing. So for me, playing a black god is so different than what we often get to see because we get portrayed as victims. It's always the story of us defined through how we were oppressed. And I wanted to tell the story of Nancy, a god who is not a black man, but somebody who doesn't see the world through the same eyes as other people do. And the interesting thing about Anansi, search him, is he's the god for the Ashanti people of Ghana. And the Ashanti people of West Africa and in Ghana are a matriarchy. So they don't believe that that men can rule, only women can rule. And it was shocking and empowering. It was just powerful to read about the way they saw the relationship between men and women. And I really wanted that to be a part of Anansi. And that's what inspired the funeral home scene and my writing all those things, Snatched, and talking about child trafficking and the pipeline and the brainwashing that is a part of our system. So I really just wanted to bring that character to life in a way that no one had ever seen before. I wanted there to be an unapologetically angry, an unapologetically black character that did not care at all what a white god thought about anything. I knew that was going to be controversial because no one had ever done that before. And I imagined it was going to be a problem. Honestly, I didn't think they were ever going to air that snatch scene when we wrote it and we shot it. I thought they were going to find a way to cut it out, and they tried. But fortunately, I was surrounded by a lot of people on the executive producer side. I had a lot of support from Ian McShane. He was definitely in my corner. And frankly, it was the core of people around me that really helped me get that done and wound up being a producer and writer on that show. And then, of course, got fired later on because the showrunner was uncomfortable with what I was doing. And I thought that was funny since he got his job based on the work that I did.
Yeah.
And I thought it was even funnier when people always talk about how money is a driving factor. Oh, black doesn't sell. Well, in this case, nobody, black, white, Latino, gay, straight, it didn't matter what you were. Everybody loved Mr. Nancy. Firing Mr. Nancy didn't make Fremantle and Stars more money. It only cost them money. I thought it was strange that these people would make those decisions that weren't beneficial to their shareholders. You made your shareholders less money. You have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to put money in their pockets. But it was your own personal point of view, your own personal racism that charged you with the power to fire me, even though it wasn't in your right business interest. It didn't make good business sense. But we don't like to talk about those issues because we like to paint a brush with it and say, oh, he must have been a pain in the butt. He must have been causing problems. No problems. And if I had done that, they would have said something earlier. That was just plain and simple racism. And it was the system of racism because people thought I had too much power as a writer on that show and too much power as a character on that show. But I'm proud of what I did. And I fought for it to be there. I'm glad I got it done. And, I wouldn't do it differently. I wouldn't change it if I had to, because I think the work speaks for itself. And for me to hear somebody like you go, yo, that's what I wanted, because that's what it was like when I first heard Public Enemy.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I mean, when I first read James Baldwin, but I didn't see that in mainstream. And when I was doing comedy, it was really hard because I remember when I first finished Drumline, the reviewer in the New York Post was like, Orlando Jones, who usually plays a buffoon. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So Ben Stiller, Vince Vaughn, they do comedy. Jim Carrey, they do crazy characters. They do comedy. Oh, they funny. But if I do it, I'm a buffoon.
Yeah, I didn't see no buffooning.
This is what we're dealing with. And I stopped doing comedy, to be honest with you. I had done a comedy in 12 years because of that. Because I was like, if that's what it is, then I'd rather not do it, even though it's certainly easy for me to do. And I stopped doing comedy because I was like, I need to lay down a legacy that is legit. Because I don't want my children, my family, but mostly my people to look at, what my contribution artistically has been to this community and think of it like, oh, Orlando Jones was just buffooning. So I was like, I can do without comedy, and I'll be a dramatic actor. And, plenty of people told me that was a mistake. And how you going to be a dramatic actor? You can't do that. And I was like, I can show you better than I can tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was reading the article and it said at one point you were pondering legal action against the show's producers. Did you ever follow through with that?
We're in legal action now. I'm actually really happy that my sister Gabrielle settled her case. I think that announced today. So I'm super happy for Gabrielle Union. That's my homie. We go back. But we've been in a law battle with them since that happened with the full support of Screen Actors Guild. So I'm still in my legal battle with them now. So we'll see when it resolves. Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was important for those coming behind me to take legal action. I don't think anybody should have to walk into the circumstances I walked into. At the end of the day, I was contracted to be an actor on season 2. And when I showed up, my character wasn't written. It was Neil Gaiman who asked me to write a character Bible and told me that they hadn't done anything for my character. And I had been on hiatus for 20 months. So for 20 months, they didn't pay me, but they sat on my rights and they took me out of work. And then when I showed up to work, they hadn't written my character. And then they asked me to do it. And then when I did it, they didn't want to pay me. And then when they asked me to write Shadow Moon and Bilquist and Ibis and some Laura Moon and some Mad Sweeney and some Sam Black Crow and Salim and the Jinn, I'm writing all these characters. They didn't want to pay me. And then it was really Writers Guild that said, he's a tenured Writers Guild member. He's been in the guild for over 25 years. Here's how you have to pay him. And they still paid me 15 cents on the dollar. And I had to accept that because that's what happens when you have a retroactive contract. So I accepted that. I did all the work. Then I did all the press to season 2. Season 2 launches to the biggest numbers that show had ever seen. They pick up the show for season 3. They tell me I'm going to be on the show in season 3. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a producer. They sit on my rights again for another 9 months. And then 10 days before I'm supposed to go to work, I get a call from the people that I don't even work for, which is Stars, and I work for Fremantle, telling me I'm fired. So for me, they took me out of work and sat on my rights for 34 months, where they did not pay me and did not allow me to work and were holding me like a slave. And the craziest part was when they fired me in September, they wouldn't give me a release from my contract. So I waited October. Guys, send me the release so I can go to work.
Yeah.
November. Guys, send me the release so I can go to work. Then the scene from the funeral parlor goes viral. And everybody's talking about it, and they're tweeting it, and they're sharing it. And people are sending me messages going, yo, I got to check out Mr. Nancy. I didn't know about this show. I slept on it. December. It's now 3.5 months later. I still can't get a release to go to work. And that's when I dropped that message on December 14th. But think about that. September, October, November, December. I waited 4 months. They wouldn't send me a release. And I had to come out and tell people that I wasn't on the show because they were still selling subscriptions on my name and likeness and on my work. And the crazy part is they just released a trailer for season 3 and they're teasing season 2 and they got my face in it again. So they are still selling subscriptions off of my name and likeness, but they didn't pay me. They refused to pay my contract even though they were in breach. So I look at those things and say, your children and my children should not have to walk into a situation with Fremantle or Stars or NBC or any company and have them refuse to pay you for your work, profit off of your work, and then not give you the proper release you need so you can go do other work. That's peonage. That's black code. That ain't nothing but legalized slavery. And so for me, I had to fight that battle. I couldn't let that go.
You know, when you see a character like Mr. Nancy and then you see Mr. Nancy, you see Orlando Jones get fired and then you outspoken about it, usually that's a death sentence in Hollywood from us looking in like, oh, damn, he probably won't get a job again. How did you get any backlash for that in Hollywood?
Look, man, if you don't have the integrity, the intestinal fortitude to stand up for what's right,
for
what you believe in, if what you're going to do is shrink every time people tell you they don't like what you have to say, then you got a problem. This ain't the life for you. You know, I went directly to Good Lord Bird with Ethan Hawke, which is coming out now. I went directly to LA's Finest. And, you know, as soon as I got my release paperwork and supported my girl, Gabrielle Union. So did it piss some people off? I guess. Do I care? Not particularly, because I didn't lie. I didn't do anything wrong. I did my job. If y'all mad at me because I did my job too well, that's your problem. That ain't my problem. If you don't like what I have to say about systemic racism, that ain't gonna make it go away, whether you like it or don't like it. So for me, it was just simply more important to be outspoken about that and to shine a light on that, because I just don't want people coming behind me to have to deal with that. And that's a fight worth fighting. And I accept that fight and I'm still in it. And I don't have to fight it with everybody. But I think the funniest part of it, particularly listening to naysayers, is that they act like, and my own cast member said this. My own black cast member said I played the race card. And I had to laugh.
Right.
Because for me, it was like, how do I play the race card? How does that work? We think I had a bag over my head and gloves over my hand. And then one day I was like, ha ha, I'm black. I bet you didn't know that. You knew I was black when you hired me. You knew what you wanted me to do when you asked me to come play Mr. Nancy. 2 white writers wrote Angry Gets Shit Done. So what was there to be mad about? You approved the script. I don't have final say or cut or edit. So how on earth did I play a card when all I did was my job and other people's jobs, and you paid all those people and sent them home and then demonized me for picking up not only just the slack on me, but the slack for your entire show and I'm playing a race card, but I think it speaks volumes to how we get brainwashed and how often he just picked up some narrative he heard some white people say and felt comfortable to say it because they were saying it, so it had to be true. And it never occurred to him that I was the one that saved his ass in season 2 and wrote his character when they didn't care enough to do it. So I was like, wow, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. I understand that, but I also understand that that's youth. I'm not mad at him, but by the same token, I'm like, I'm not giving you a free pass to gaslight me because that wasn't what you were doing when I was showing up to set, rewriting scenes for you, when I was in the writer's room fighting for you, when people were saying you can't act and they don't want to give you more to do. I was the one saying, what are you talking about? He can't act. You cast him in the show, respect him, and give him the opportunity to do his best work. Don't disrespect him. That was me fighting for you. And I wouldn't change that fight, even though he said what he said. But by the same token, it does hurt when you see your own people stab you when you ain't done nothing but try and uplift it.